Hello everyone, welcome to our presentation today. My name's Aaron Harkleroad, I'm with Wicresoft. Today's presentation is on enterprise resource management, the essential steps to managing resources. Before we get started, I do have a few quick logistics to go over with you. First off, due to the large audience, we're not going to be opening the phone lines up for questioning today, so everyone will remain on mute. However, if time does permit, we'll review some of the most commonly asked questions throughout the presentation at the close of the webinar. So feel free to leverage the chat module within your GoToWebinar panel to ask your questions. We'll have somebody monitoring the chat and question panel throughout the presentation. And you can also feel free to email me directly, and I'll be happy to answer your questions as well. So I'll be giving you my contact information. You'll see my email on one of the final slides in the presentation. If for any reason you get distracted or pulled away during the webinar, no worries. We are recording today's presentation, and that's going to go up on our YouTube channel, and a link will be sent out to everybody who's registered for this webinar. So with that, let's go ahead and move on. For today's agenda, we'll be covering the following topics. First, we'll give you a fairly detailed overview of resource management, what it means and how the discipline is leveraged in organizations today. We'll then take a look at some of the common challenges that we typically see within organizations as it relates to resource management. And if the challenges sound familiar, we'll help you get some ideas on how to address them. We'll then go into a 5-step approach for managing your resources. And then finally, I'll show you a live demo of some of the resource management tools that can help you to better plan, track, and manage your resources. So let's take a look at some of those details. So what is resource management? Well, first off, I've included the Wikipedia definition of resource management up on the left here. Resource management, it's the efficient and effective deployment and allocation of an organization's resources when and where they're needed. A couple of quick points that I'd like to make here. One, resource management is not just assigning resources to a task and a schedule. That's certainly part of it, but what we're looking for is optimization or the best and most efficient and effective ways to deploy resources, meaning that you put the right resources on the right task at the right time. Also, as you'll see, resources are not just people. Resources can be materials, capital, or other resources needed to complete your work. So why is resource management important? Well, resource management does have many benefits. A lot of organizations might be happy by just simply understanding who's working on what tasks. And while that's definitely a benefit, there are many other pros within the discipline. If you have your most valuable resources assigned to the work that will ultimately bring the most value to the organization, you will net just that, right? More business value. You'll also save time and money simply because the best fit resources should get it done faster and more efficiently than resources that may be lacking the appropriate skill or might have a little bit less experience than what the particular work calls for. So applying resources correctly also helps control project success rates, costs. You won't be as successful reaching a deadline if there's a lot of reworker involved, or if the resource takes twice the amount of time because they simply just don't have the knowledge and they need knowledge transfer maybe to get some of that work done. Demand analysis and demand management is also a very big part of it. So a lot of organizations might stop at resource assignments for their current project pipeline, but what about proposed projects or any type of unexpected demand? So we all know that we have to be agile these days, stay on top of our competition, so that essentially means nothing is static. So what might be a high value project today might not be as high a value project tomorrow. So you have to be able to accommodate new demand and also assess what your overall high value and high priority projects are. Lastly, but definitely not least important, is the health of your employees. So over-allocated resources, over-allocated employees, that can lead to burnout. And even underutilization can have its own set of issues as well. So how you manage your resources affects your employees, certainly. All right, so let's take a look at some common resource challenges. First, we have resource ownership. Oftentimes in organizations, resources are controlled by multiple groups and managers, which can make it pretty difficult simply because they may have different priorities or interests. Second, we have resource focus. Many times resources have different focuses for various projects. A developer, for example, may be a key player in developing the latest release, which might be a top strategic initiative for the organization, but they might also be working with customer success to resolve a custom code issue. This lack of focus can cause issues for many reasons. Many project managers make the mistake of assigning resources as if they're 100% allocated to projects, or every task that they put them on, they put them in as 100%. But as we all know, a lot of times that's not often the case. Resources oftentimes have other work outside those projects, non-project work, that need to get done. Resource tracking is another challenge. So oftentimes companies, they might use Excel or some other tools to manage and track their resources, or they might have a timesheet system that tracks it for them. So in many cases, the tool that tracks the resources is disconnected from the project and work system, making the data less accurate. We all know that one of the most common challenges that organizations want to resolve is knowing what resources are working on what projects and when. This is typically one of the top challenges we hear when we're assessing a business's resource management needs. We mentioned resource tracking earlier, which can lead to manual reporting sometimes as well, particularly if you have systems that are disconnected. Processes might be lacking as well, and manual reporting, as we all know, can be a pretty big challenge. And the last one is simply too much information. So many times you might have resources entering their time in one place, and then you might have them entering % complete in the project schedule, and the capacity plans might be found in still another system altogether. So it's possible that there's just too much unorganized data to make sense of it all, preventing any possibility of optimizing your decision-making capabilities. There are many different stages and processes used for resource management. So these are the 5 steps we use here at Wicresoft, very similar to Gartner's life cycle, which you'll see in just a moment. Our steps reflect the big picture of what's needed to master resource management. I'll take you through them at the highest level. During capacity planning, you'll see what generic roles you need to source your initiatives, as well as how much time or how many hours. Next stage is resource assignments. So in that stage, you can match skill sets, availability with actual named resources. Resource tracking is really your control step, or your control stage. So you'll be resolving constraints, mitigating risks, ensuring that new issues don't arise. This also involves tracking overall performance of your resources. The team management phase involves fostering team dynamics, ensuring that your teams are working well together and have a shared understanding of the current state of the project or initiative. And then finally, we have work management. The work management step is all about personal productivity and ensuring that everyone has what they need to be the most productive. This graphic represents Gartner's resource management by maturity level. So you'll notice their resource management steps kind of similar to the ones we just reviewed down the left-hand side. Gartner produced a research paper a few years back that represented sort of a crawl, walk, run approach to resource management. A lot of times, and we see this often, organizations might try to boil the ocean, take on too much functionality or discipline all at once, and that can actually hinder your success because simply the organization might not be ready for the amount of change at such a rapid pace. So as you introduce nuances, risks, the risk increase. So it's critical that you take your time scaling to the maturity level that you desire for your organization. Here are a few tips to consider when implementing resource management within your organization. First, assess your organization's readiness. What tools are you using today? What's working? What's not working? What levels of resource management are your managers using currently? These are all good questions to ask when determining if your team is ready for resource management, and if so, at what level. Understanding your organization's PM maturity is also key. Based on given maturity level, this can help you determine, again, what steps of resource management you will want to introduce to ensure minimal risk. Understanding the environment, this one's important for a lot of reasons. For example, how does your organization handle change? Is there a change management process in place? Who owns the resources? How is the organization structured? Is it matrixed? Is it projectized, etc.? All of the answers to those questions will play a key role in preparing you for number 4 here, building your resource management roadmap. As with any technology or discipline, it's essential to progress at a speed that's adequate for the business. The roadmap will include the details of timeline and scale. Also, another point to make here, resource management's a process. Defining the process first is another way to ensure success. Don't let technology drive you. Align technology to your processes and then go from there. Now, Project Online. Project Online is Microsoft's full PPM or project and portfolio management stack built in the cloud. All of the functionality of Microsoft Project and Project Server on premises plus more is available in Project Online. The plus more is important because it's fully integrated with Office 365. So all the familiar Microsoft tools that people are using today, integration with Outlook, Skype for Business, Yammer, Power BI, OneDrive for Business, SharePoint, Flow, Power Apps, etc., etc. And why is that important? Well, you can't be successful with PPM if your users aren't adopting. So familiar technology that's all connected together, that's a huge value proposition for moving online. We all resist change and fear the unknown. The more familiarity we can add, the better. Technology plays a big role in successful resource management, and you'll see that coming up in the demo. And of course, Microsoft Project Online is built on a reliable cloud infrastructure that meets compliance and maximizes uptime. So when I do the demo today for resource management, you're going to see me using a Project Online environment for that. Now, before I go into the demo and cover the different resource management tools we have in Project Online, I wanted to give you a brief overview of who we are and what we do. Wicresoft is a business productivity solution provider. We are 100% focused on the Microsoft Cloud. We've got many years of Microsoft technology experience across the board, and we've been working with customers to adopt and excel in their online environments since the beginning of software as a service or SaaS solution offerings. We also offer pre-built business solutions that are designed to get organizations up and running quickly with little upfront costs, leveraging best practice configuration so that you can get the most out of your Office 365 or Project Online environments. We're triple gold certified with Microsoft. We hold the CSP, Cloud Solution Provider certification, and we're also part of the P-Seller program with Microsoft. Okay. So we do have expertise across several different platforms, several different stacks within Microsoft. So Office 365, Dynamics, SharePoint. Today's focus is primarily going to be, again, in Project Online within the PPM space. And again, as I mentioned a little bit ago, one of the things that we do as an organization is we do have pre-built applications that can help you extend the functionality of Project Online. For instance, we have a product called Kickstart and Kickstart Plus that can help you accelerate your deployment of Project Online. So using best practices that we have utilized over many years of setting up, configuring Project Online. It comes with some out-of-the-box reports so that you're not spending time configuring the environment, loading your users, building reports. With the Kickstart Plus product, you can accelerate your deployment and use of the tool by as much as half. We also offer pre-built report packages. So we have a Power BI reporting pack for Project Online, which you'll see shortly. And we also have integration solutions. So as I mentioned earlier, if you are perhaps using some other platform, maybe for work management, so maybe your Scrum teams are managing their epics, feature stories, something like that in a separate platform, like maybe Jira or Visual Studio Online, we can integrate that with Project Online so that you can leverage Project Online for its real strengths, portfolio management, demand management, cost management, things like that, and and have your organization a little bit more unified. So there's lots of resource management tools embedded into Project Online. So what I'm going to do now is switch over to our demo environment and walk you through a lot of the features that you're seeing on the screen here. So I'm going to start off, I'm in the Resource Center. So Resource Center is one of the main areas in Project Online. It's where you'll find all of your enterprise resources. We have different types of resources in here. So not all resources are human resources, but you can see here we have some resources that are named. Some resources represent just a generic role, typically used for planning, early planning of projects. Um, we also have budget and cost resources. So a lot of times you might want to track within your project schedule non-labor costs, so things like travel, hardware, software, stuff like that. So we can have resources loaded in the resource pool that also can be used to manage and track those things as well. For the human resources, we have a lot of different metadata to really manage the resources that we have in the resource pool. So you see here I have my resources grouped by role, so what role the resource falls into primarily within the organization. For resources that might fit into more than one role, you can have additional roles like a secondary role, skills field, things like that. And those all come into play when you're assessing who the best resource for work on a project is, and also when you're reporting on things like utilization. Resources also have a calendar that they work, if they are a work resource, that is. What their maximum level of utilization is. So for instance, I might work a 40-hour week calendar, but I might only be available for project work 20 hours a week. So you can configure all of your resources to model that, so that when you're planning your schedules and when you're reporting on your projects in the portfolio, you have accurate information coming back out. If I navigate over to the project center in the same environment, here we have a list of the projects that have been loaded into the Project Online environment. And in the Project Center, we can use different views here to analyze the projects that we have. So currently I'm looking at a view where I can see my projects based on where they are in the life cycle. So I have some phases configured in here. So depending upon what type of project management methodologies you follow, if you do Six Sigma and you use the DMAIC, define, measure, analyze, improve, control phases, or more of PMBOK style of initiation, planning, execute, control, you can configure those phases and then view your projects based on where they are in the life cycle. So in this particular environment, I have them broken up in the phase kind of based on how I handle demand management in this environment. So I have my projects that have just been introduced here that are still in the create phase. I still have to define the business case, plan the budget for them, model the resource demand for those projects, okay? And then if I have some projects that I want to run through the analysis engine in here and see, okay, comparing these projects which haven't really started yet to some of my in-flight projects to see how they impact my portfolio. What kind of business value do they deliver? Do I have enough resources to manage them? Things like that. I can take projects that are in my select phase here and compare them for that analysis. And then the projects that are in flight are in, I have phases for plan, manage, and measure. But again, you can configure whatever phase values you use in your organization, so the terminology and the nomenclature matches what your folks are already used to. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate into one project that I have loaded in here that's in that create phase. So I'll just go ahead and click on this very first one in the list. It takes me into the details of the project. Okay. And what you see here is the project schedule. Now you can manage the project schedule right in the web browser. But you can also manage project schedules in Project Online in Project Professional as well. And if you buy a Project Professional license for your folks, so Project Online has 3 different license levels. The middle tier license is called the Project Professional license. That will include the Microsoft Project Professional client that users can download and install on up to 5 different devices. So while I can manage a schedule in the browser, for more of the detailed resource management capabilities, I'm probably going to leverage Microsoft Project Professional Client a little bit more often than that. It has some robust capabilities. So I'm going to take this same project here, and I'm actually going to open it up in Microsoft Project Professional, which you're looking at here. And what I'll do is I'll compare and contrast a couple different projects. So this is one of those projects that's very early on in the overall life cycle. It's really in the planning phase. We haven't begun any work on it yet. So what you see in this particular project is a lot of generic resources. So I know I'm going to need a BA or an analyst for some work. I don't know which one yet. I'm going to need developers. I'm going to need product engineers. If we contrast that with a project that's a little bit further on in its life cycle, okay, what you might see in a project like that is you might see a fully detailed Gantt like you're looking at here. And if you look in the resource names column, I no longer see generic resources. So I'm at the point in this project, okay, where I've actually replaced any of my generic resources that were used for early planning with the actual named resources that are either planned to do the work if it's coming up in the future, or in some cases completed the work. So you'll notice in the indicators column here, I have lots of check marks indicating the tasks and the schedule that have been completed. Now let me just switch back to my first project, the one that's in early planning. Okay, so if I switch over to the actual schedule for this, you'll see that I do have some tasks laid out, but again, the resources that I have on those tasks, I'm using generics at this point, and so I don't know which generics I might use. Okay, and recently introduced in Microsoft Project and Project Online, a little bit over a year ago, is a new feature particularly useful for PMs and resource managers called the resource engagement process. So what this allows you to do is really incorporate the resource managers into the workflow, so that when a PM needs a particular resource or type of resource, there's a process built around that. So let me show you quickly how that works. So if I switch back to my resource plan view here, okay, so this is the view that I can come in and sort of plan out the demand for this type of project if it hasn't started yet, so that when we analyze it within the portfolio, we'll have some accurate information on there. So I might say, okay, based on the type of project, and we've done this project several times before, I'm going to need an analyst for a certain period of time in here. So I can come over here to this engagements menu here. I can add an engagement for any of these resources that I have here. So I'll choose the analyst resource, and looking at the schedule when I'd like to start this, okay, so I'm going to put a description in here. So I need some early BA planning to be performed, and we would like to start that beginning of the month or as close to the beginning of the month as possible. So I'm going to put a start and a finish date in here. So roughly how long I'm going to need a resource or resources for. And then when I make this request, I can either put in, if I have a pretty good estimate of the amount of work that it's going to take, I can enter that in hours, days, weeks, or I can change over to units and put it in, perhaps in like full-time equivalent. So maybe what I need for this type of project is, at most I might need 2 analysts. So I'm going to put in 200 as in 200%. Okay, going to click OK on that. And what it does is it shows up here in the resource plan, okay, as a draft. I haven't submitted this yet, but it also gives me the opportunity to come in here and contour this a little bit. So maybe the first couple of weeks, I don't necessarily need 2 BAs. I might need 1 just for the initial requirements, so kind of ramp up a little bit, okay? And then we'll sort of level off at needing 2 BAs for the rest of the planning period, and we hope to be done with the planning by the end of the end of August, let's say. So when I'm happy with that, and of course I can submit these engagement requests for any of these types of roles or specific resources that I want on my project team, what I can do is I can submit selected or all these engagements. And if you have the email alerts capability turned on in your Project Online environment, that will actually fire up an email to whichever manager or managers handles, in this case, the analysts team. So you can make your roles, so I'm using an analyst role in here, you can make them as specific as you want. So for instance, if you had, say, an SAP business analyst and a project business analyst, you could identify those and separate them. Okay. So now that I've submitted that engagement, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of switch hats and come over here. I'm going to navigate back into the Resource Center and put on my Resource Manager hat. So if I got an email sent to me that 1 or more resources that reports to me have had an engagement request sent to me, I also have a link in that email to come over here to the Resource Center and take a look at those details. Okay, so I'm manually doing it here, but I could do this right directly from the hyperlink in the email. So I can come in here, and if the PM put a request in for an analyst, I can take a look at the various resource requests. So right now I have all of my analysts selected. Okay, because when I'm fulfilling this request, I might want to figure out who's the best analyst for actually doing this. So I can take a look, and I can see that several of my analysts do have some engagement requests that have been submitted. Some of them I've already accepted. Those are shown in committed here. Some of them I haven't accepted yet. I haven't taken action on. Those are still proposed. Okay, and here's the one that I just put in. So from the plan start and plan finish of 7/3 to 8/25, there's my 200%. So what I can do now is I can figure out, okay, who's going to be the best analyst for fulfilling this request as a resource manager. So some of the tools that I have in here, I can bounce over to this capacity planning option right here in the Resource Center. And when I come into capacity planning, now there's lots of different ways to analyze the capacity and slice and dice and eventually fulfill this request. So whichever view I was using last is going to be the one that I come into. And typically, if I was a resource manager fulfilling engagement requests, I would normally be looking at this capacity and engagements heat map first. Okay. Now up in the menu here, I can do things like change the time scale. So if I want to look at this on a weekly basis as opposed to monthly, which I'm looking at right here, I can do that. Okay, zoom in on that a little bit for you. And if I wanted to see the work units in, say full-time equivalent or days as opposed to hours, I can change some of those options up in the menu here. I can also toggle on and off whether I want to look at any proposed bookings or just the people that have already been hard committed on projects. So if I'm fulfilling an engagement request, I might also want to evaluate, well, who else has been proposed to be booked on a project or perhaps several projects in here. Okay, so from here, I can take a look at this information and the color coding in this heat map. Anybody that's showing up in red, like Kelly Kraut here, she's already over allocated. So she's definitely not a candidate for this. As a matter of fact, she's so over allocated that I need to talk to the PM who's managing this payroll system upgrade and get that PM to level her work out a little bit. Either get another analyst on it or schedule her work out over a little bit longer period. If she works roughly 160-hour month, I can see here that she's quite over allocated in July, August, and September. So she's definitely out on this. So what I might do, again, to figure out who I'm going to fulfill that engagement request is perhaps bounce over to one of the other views that I have here. So the one that was shown originally when I came in is resource utilization. I mean, that's nice because I can see what the capacity of these resources are. Okay, and I can come over here and I can separate out. So I can click on some resources that I know might not be candidates. Okay, and just take a look at what they have remaining here. Okay. Now, again, for figuring out who best to fulfill this engagement request, I have another view called the remaining availability, which might be a little bit more useful here. So with remaining availability, what you see is the 0 line in the middle. And I can hover over this and see anybody who has negative, they're certainly out, they're over allocated, negative availability in this time frame. So like analyst is the generic, what we're really trying to do is replace the generic with a named resource. So if I filter that one out, I can also see that Ben, okay, is underwater in August, and Ben and Kelly are both underwater in July, so they're both over allocated a little bit. So if I had some resources that I wanted to filter out of the mix here, I can do that, and then I can see the remaining resources, what their availability. So it looks like all the rest of them have roughly the same amount of availability in those months. So I could then go back to the resource request as the manager of those resources. Okay, and one of the things you can do, so for these named resources, if I have verified that, for instance, Ben is available for whatever this request represents here, you'll notice that I've got accept or reject options up here. But a resource manager can also edit an engagement request. So if I want to edit this analyst engagement request, a couple different scenarios might apply here. So for instance, a PM might have requested 2 analysts, and I might say, well, I only have 1. So I could edit this and put some comments in here and say, I'm dropping this down to 100%. We only have 1 resource or 1 analyst available in that time period, so I could do that. Okay. The other thing I could do is perhaps replace the analyst with who I actually want to use. So maybe we'll use Chris Gray for that. Okay. And in either case, what I can do is I can save that, and I can come back here and I can accept the engagement request. When I do so, again, if you have the email capabilities turned on, the PM will get an email alerting them that an engagement request has been approved or rejected if I rejected it. Okay. But not only that, if I come back to my schedule here, okay, what the PM would also see on the resource plan here is they would see the engagement status move from proposed to committed in here. So when this was initially put in before I submitted it, it was a draft. Now that I've submitted it, but nobody's accepted it yet as proposed, if the resource manager actually did accept that, this would switch over to committed. And then I could go back into my schedule and I could start to say, okay, we're going to use, if it was Chris in that instance, we're going to use Chris for all of these analyst hours in here. So that's sort of a high-level overview of the engagement process, plus some of the built-in tools that you have for seeing what the capacity of resources are. Another important aspect of this when it comes to resource management, so as I've done that for multiple projects, so again, if I go back to my project center here, and I've got several projects that have had the resource demand fully modeled, okay, what I can do is I can incorporate into my lifecycle management those projects that do have the resource demand fulfilled. Those can move from that early create phase into a select phase, or maybe from an initiation phase to a planning phase, something like that. And that can be useful if I want to use the portfolio analysis module that's built into Project Online. So portfolio analysis inside the tool is very robust. It helps me address demand management. So taking a look at my portfolio of in-flight projects alongside some proposed projects and seeing what's the impact on my portfolio, balancing the projects in my portfolio based on their returns back to the business, etc. That's all part of this. So what I'm going to do is give you a high-level overview of the portfolio analysis, particularly as it pertains to the resource management aspect of it, but I'll also show you some of the other features that are in there as well. So if I navigate over to portfolio analysis in the menu here. So what you can do is you can, as you see here, I have several analyses already in the system. So you can perform an analysis at whatever frequency meets your needs. You can do these analyses for specific business units. So for instance, I might just be analyzing the portfolio of IT projects. Okay, or maybe analyzing the portfolio of marketing campaigns and things like that. Or you might have an analysis that encompasses projects across multiple business units, so a sort of more global portfolio as well. And you can have a hybrid approach where some analyses might contain specific BUs or specific portfolios projects, and some analyses may include every project that's in the system. Now, I shouldn't say every project, because projects that are closed out, that are completed, you certainly wouldn't want to analyze those. And at the other end of the spectrum, projects that have just been introduced to the system, but you don't have a resource demand modeled for them yet via the resource plan or the schedule, and you don't have any kind of budget established, well, those are kind of premature to pull into an analysis. So again, analyzing the right projects is a big part of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into this analysis that I created a little bit earlier. Okay, I called this the FY18 to 19 demand analysis. And as I pointed out, again, if I just wanted to pick projects within, say, a specific business unit, I've got this ability to do that through my departments field here. Okay. Also, I've got these different prioritization models in here. So part of this portfolio analysis, it's not all just about managing the resource demand, but part of it is also analyzing what the overall priority of each of these projects are. And the way we do that, we don't take a simple approach by giving the project sponsors or the project owners or the PMs a question on an input form that says, what's the priority of this project? In which case you'll get 99% of them back saying it's a high priority project. But instead what we do is we define business drivers in here. And we set different threshold values on those business drivers, or different grades, if you will, so that we can take a more nuanced approach to defining how much does this project give back to the business? How does it help us meet our strategic goals? So you're going to see that in a little bit here. And those drivers that you do define, you don't have to weight them all equally. So this prioritization model that you're seeing here as a choice is which drivers are included and what specific weight are applied to those different drivers. Okay. Then I have 22 projects selected in this analysis, and I've got the ability to play around with cost constraints. So if I need to increase or reduce budget, okay, to get my portfolio balance, I can do that. And then also a planning horizon for the resources. So as I step through this, the next screen that I come to would be the screen where I'm able to take a look at all the projects that are part of this analysis. So each project is on a row here. And then the drivers that are defined in this environment. I'll give you a couple examples. Expanding into new markets and segments, improving product quality, increasing market share in existing. Okay, so I can see what the scores against each of those drivers are for each of these projects. And as a portfolio owner, if I dispute any of these, so if I say, okay, expanding raw material vendor lists at best might be strong for this particular driver, I can override these values here. Okay, but when I've analyzed this and I'm happy, I can go to the next screen, which is going to show me overall my top to bottom prioritization of the project. So I can see what my top priority project all the way down to my bottom priority project is. And then from there, what I can do is I can go through several what-if scenarios if need be. So I can analyze this from a cost perspective. So for instance, if I did need to reduce the budget, if I don't have in the next 2 fiscal years $31 million to spend on these projects, I can play around with different values in here. Okay, hit it recalculate, and then it'll balance the portfolio based on any constraints that I apply. Since we're focusing more on resource management here, let me kind of cut to the chase and take a look at how this plays with your overall resource management. So of these 22 projects that I'm analyzing right now, some of them have already begun. I do want to include my in-flight projects. Okay, and some of these are projects that they haven't actually started executing yet, but we do have the resource demand modeled for them, and we've got the business case built. We've got the the budget estimates in there. Okay, and of that, what this is telling me is of the 22 projects you're analyzing, you actually only have the ability from a demand perspective to do 12 of these projects. So, under or just over half. Now what you can do, you take some time with this. I'm going to go over it relatively quickly here, but you can take a look at how much these projects overlap. Okay. Take a look at what the requirement details of the projects are. So as I click requirement details here, I can take a look at which resources, okay, and it presents it in a role basis. So it doesn't show me the actual resources, even if I have named resources in them, but which resources these projects are using from a role perspective and which ones have deficiencies. So I can take a look in certain months of which roles. So for instance, this update logistics tracking system is short a software engineer. It's shown in full-time equivalent here. See some other projects that might be short of a software engineer. Some projects here, like this Dynamics one, is short several different resources. And what that analysis allows me to do is some of the what ifs that I can play around with these projects would entail, without actually spending any more money on the portfolio, is there a way to get any more of these projects that I really want to do into the mix by simply rescheduling them? Okay, so one of the things I can do on any projects that haven't actually started yet, if it's a project that's already begun, I can't propose a new start date on it. But for anything that hasn't begun yet, what if maybe we move it out several months, start it a little bit later? Okay, so that Gantt just moved out here. I'm starting it, a whole year later than I planned. If that's capable, then maybe we'll do that. Maybe start this one just a few months later. And again, what I'm trying to do is have, the overlaps of resource requirements that I have, or resource constraints, less impacted. Okay, and what I can do is I can recalculate that once I've played around with the schedule. Okay, and if that alone was enough to get some of the projects into the mix here, they'll move from this not selected bucket up to the selected bucket. Now, unfortunately, that wasn't enough. And again, I'm doing this relatively quickly here. In a real analysis, you would take lots of time really analyzing what resources are impacting these projects. Another option here is to just simply hire resources. So I can go with FTEs here and put in a number like 4 or 5. Or I can go up in the menu here and say, well, I would like to contract this work. So let's switch it to, just putting cost in and external resources. And what if I spend an extra 150,000? Okay, keep in mind I'm analyzing projects over a horizon of 2-year planning. So maybe I have 150,000 perhaps to spend over that time period. Okay, and what I can do is I can come in here, recalculate, okay, and if that's enough to get some more of the projects into the selected bucket, and that will reflect, hey, that took me from 12 to 19 projects. And what I can do with this is I can actually commit this scenario here, which will write back to the project record, what was the outcome of this project? Was it selected? Was the original start date still the same? Was it not selected? And the other things I can do, so if some of these are, for instance, a compliance project, I can override and I can force in, force out projects. So if I really need to do a project, I can force it in, okay? And by doing so, it might force other projects out. And that can actually tie into play with your governance and your lifecycle management. So if I commit this scenario, okay, I might come back, and when I look in the project center here, of those 19 projects that were in my selection phase here, okay, some of them might move forward into the plan phase if the outcome of that portfolio analysis was favorable, if they were selected. Okay. Now, you don't necessarily have to go quite that far, but you could just use that analysis, be better informed on which projects, might be candidates for putting on hold or even canceling, and which projects, okay, we're going to continue to do it, but unless we get some more resources on it, we're going to eventually see some deliverable issues down the road because the tool is telling me that you've got some resource constraint issues on that. In addition to just analyzing a portfolio of projects, another great capability in Project Online, since you have an enterprise resource pool and a portfolio of projects and all this stuff tying together, is to be able to analyze through dashboards and reports. So when you're managing your portfolio, it's not all about prioritization and picking which projects are going to take flight within your portfolio, but also just managing the day-to-day, week-to-week, seeing what's going on with the resources within your environment here. So we have a couple different ways we can go about this. So as part of our Kickstart Plus product, we have some resource management and resource analysis reports that are built right into Project Online. show you an example of a couple of those. So if I navigate over to this resource schedules page here, this is one of our built-in reports. Okay, here I can come in, I can select a time frame, so start, finish, so however long I want to analyze, weeks, months, whatever. I can pick my resources based on different roles, so I can select one or more roles. I can select the reporting structure in here, so where are they in the RBS? I can pick them by department, okay? And then ultimately, which resources, so if I apply any of those filters, it's going to show me which resources I can select here and analyze. And if I hit the filter button, this is kind of more of a tactical report. So this allows me to see on a day-to-day, okay, or week-to-week basis, depending upon how large of a time frame I've selected. It allows me to see what's on my resources plates, what kind of work assignments they have, if I have non-project work loaded into the system here, what kind of other types of work are they doing, like are they doing maintenance, keep the lights on type projects, things like that. And it will give me a color coding of what the resources availability is. So any resources that are over allocated will show in red, and resources that are under allocated will show in yellow. If they're sort of hitting the sweet spot, it'll show in green. And what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to navigate back to this page here, because I think it may have timed out from, I had it loaded previously, but we navigate back to that report called the resource schedules. We'll give it another try. And then I'll show you some other reports that we have both built into the system and then also ones that are part of Power BI. So I'll try this again, come in here, there we go, a little bit better that time. So when I hit the filter button here, I can see whichever resources I've selected, okay? I can see day to day. If I want to zoom out a little bit and look at it over a longer timeline, I can do so. Okay, but when I'm zoomed in here, I can see some details of which projects they're on, and again, a little color coding. So if they're seeing green, and that's good, I mean, they're being allocated properly. If they're yellow, then they're not quite fully utilized. If there's nothing on a particular day in here, then there's no assignments for them. And if they're red, as in the case of Ben Spain here, a little bit overutilized. Now, it's not horrible. It's only 9.6 hours a day as opposed to an 8-hour day. But if he's only expected to do about 4 hours a day of project work, well, then he's more than double allocated on that. So again, I can take a look at the projects he's on, and if I need to get in touch with the PMs to get the work balanced a little bit, get it leveled, get other resources on the project, or perhaps get the work spread out over a longer period, I'm able to assess that perhaps by looking at this here. For more of a long-range planning type scenario, we have another report called the role capacity analysis. So here, a scenario might be, again, I showed you the portfolio analysis piece a little bit ago, but without going through a complete portfolio analysis, if I just really want a quick glimpse of, hey, the next quarter, we would like to do a couple new, maybe infrastructure projects. And we know to start off those projects, we're going to need some BA hours, we're going to need some developer hours, and we're going to need some solution architect hours. I can come in here, pick one or more roles. I have 3 in this case. Pick the start and finish date. So, presumably I might be looking at the beginning of the next quarter, and take a look, aggregated automatically to the role level, what kind of availability we have on these roles. So I see the black line here represents capacity. So in the aggregate, we're not over capacity in either of these 2 months. But if I analyze down in the table below a little bit, okay, I can see specific details. And also if I take any of the roles out of the mix here. So I have a smaller pool of solution architects than I do developers and analysts. So if I break it down to just one role specifically, here I can actually see, well, the analysts are a little over allocated in that first month. Okay, but then they have some bandwidth in the second month. So maybe if we balance a little bit of the initial workload, we'll be okay. Okay, if I pull developers into the mix, they're good. I mean, they have some excess bandwidth in both months. And if I look at the solution architects, smaller pool of individuals, but they're below the capacity line as well. And looking at the bar below, I can also validate that information, see which projects they're on, and see what their capacity and utilization in each of these time periods are. So examples of a couple different reports we have right in the tool itself. Okay, but also within Power BI. So Power BI is Microsoft's business intelligence platform within the cloud. So if I navigate over to a Power BI report I have loaded here. So if those of you familiar with Office 365, if you click the waffle in the upper left-hand corner, okay, this shows me all the Office 365 applications that I have access to in this environment. Project Online is one of them. Power BI is another one. Okay, so here what I have is one of our Power BI reports loaded, and this specific one is for resource management. Okay, so this resource status report here, you'll notice I have several pages down below, And what this is analyzing is utilization of the resources in my resource pool across the different projects within the portfolio. So you can see here different types of charts. I see the overall percent of availability, and looking across the whole entire resource pool, not so bad, 38%, but I do probably have, if I look over here on the right, I've got certain resources individually that are definitely over allocated here. So again, got to, level their work off and balance it with some other team members perhaps. Okay, but across the portfolio, we're looking pretty good. I can see the work by different types. I can see the work versus capacity here in a chart. Okay, and what you can do, these charts are interactive. So for instance, in the stacked bar down below, these are color-coded for the different roles that I have. So if I wanted to analyze a particular role like project managers, okay, I can click on that. And the other details in the report, like my individual resources that are utilized on the right here, will reflect who I have selected. My percent of availability, okay, so 52%. Availability. So I'm a little bit more utilized in the PM space. Okay, if I click on a different role in here, like if I move over to the support role, okay, I can see they're only 19% utilized. Okay, and I can see which resources are the most overutilized, all the way down to resources that are not utilized at all within that particular role. So that's sort of a high-level dashboard. From here, I can take a look at, I can sort of step down into more specific resource management areas, like utilization, for instance. So here, if I come into utilization, what we have is we've got a line showing me the overall capacity, and I've got all of my resources stacked right now. So if I wanted to come in and narrow the focus a little bit, I'll show you a couple different ways that you can, well, you saw me on the previous screen, click on a value in the bar chart. You can also use, for instance, I see the different resources. Let's see what's on Amy's plate, because I know one of the PMs has requested her on a project to do some work. So I can use this report in addition to the things that I have in the tool to figure out, what kind of current and upcoming availability she has. So I select Amy, and I can see, if I scroll to the right here a little bit, I don't necessarily need to go too far back, but what's she looking at in the July, August, September time frame? So right now she's okay. She's got some availability, but again, when we get into August and September, okay, now again, we're not there yet, but some of the plans that have been laid out, whether it's a resource plan or an actual schedule that have some assignments allocated toward Amy, she's a little bit underwater in those months. So again, I would need to take a look at the projects that she's on, get with those PMs, and let them know that, well, okay, right now you have her a little bit overutilized in that month, so let's balance that work out a little bit. Okay, if I go to the availability page in here, okay, what you can see here is I have a chart where we're broken down again by role. Okay, so for instance, if I was working with my QA people, my quality folks, and I wanted to analyze just within the QA department what we have going on in terms of availability, again, can click on the QA role in here. The table down below, which shows me the resources that are mapped to that role. I can see from a high level what their total capacity, work, availability is, what the percent of average availability is for them in a particular time period. If I go to committed versus plan, I can see some of that information broken out over quarterly time periods here. And I showed you the engagement process a little bit earlier. So if I go to the engagement page here, I can see from a very high level, so from a more of a portfolio level, I can see what the resource engagements are. So where I showed you sort of wearing the resource manager hat, looking at some very specific resources, just the analysts team that I'm managing, here I can take a look at it at more portfolio, a much broader level. Okay, and I can still sort of decompose or analyze at a lower level. For instance, if I come over here to the filters drop down, maybe what I want to do is I want to take a look at the engagements of all the projects within a particular program that I'm running. So maybe I'm a program manager, okay, and if I'm running, let's say, the improvements program, and I want to see how we're looking with our engagement requests within all the projects that are part of the improvements program, I can select that as a filter, okay. And what I can see, I've got 3 projects within that improvements program, okay, and I can see who is being requested among those projects graphically up top and in a table down below. And if I wanted to further filter it and say, hey, I only want to look where, in a current year, let's say, so I only want to look at the 2017 requests, I can apply an additional filter as well. and take a look down the table and see what kind of requests are being made of my resources within the improvements program, okay, in the time period. So again, this in conjunction with some of the built-in tools can help you assess how your resources are being utilized, whether you have any hiring needs, or whether you have any resource constraint needs that are keeping you from doing some projects that you might want to be doing in next fiscal year, next fiscal quarter, things like that. And then also tracking actuals. So I take a look at resource assignments here. Okay, on the resource assignments page, we can take a look at the actual work assignments or task from schedules that are assigned to resources. Okay, track things like how many hours they're assigned to, how far along they are in that in terms of percent complete, etc. So we've got some very rich reporting capabilities with our Power BI report pack that can help you analyze and plan and manage your resources within the Project Online environment. So with that, I'm going to go back to the last couple remaining slides that I have here. So I want to extend a couple special offers to you. So we do offer a free PPM and resource management assessment and roadmap. And also, if your organization is interested in kicking the tires in Project Online, we can set you up with a Project Online 30-day trial where you can have up to 10 of your users going in there and using the tool, seeing if it's going to be a good fit for your organization. So if you are interested in either of these and you want to schedule perhaps a live one-on-one demo of how Project Online can work for you, or investigate getting a Project Online trial for your organization, you can contact NA Sales, North America Sales at Wicresoft.com. Okay. Any questions that you have from the demo today specifically, or with regards to resource management in general, you can also email me directly. So again, my name's Aaron Harkleroad. My email address is aharkleroad@Wicresoft.com. We do have some upcoming webinars. So next week's webinar, actually I think it's in 2 weeks. No, it is next week, sorry. Kickstarting your digital PMO. And in a couple weeks after that, moving your PMO to the cloud, why you can't afford to miss the wave. We've got a project insights and analytics. So I gave you sort of a real quick overview of Power BI and some of the reports and dashboards that you have in there, as well as the in-band reports and dashboards and some of our tools. But the webinar on project insights and analytics is going to take a much deeper look at that. So those are coming up in the future. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Hope you found this information useful and insightful. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. I am going to stop the recording in a little bit here, and then I'll have, if we had any questions that were typed into the chat panel, I'll address them at that time, since we have about 5 minutes left in the hour.